Lord. I'll be somewhere, again I'll be somewhere, again I'll be somewhere, working for my Lord.
If you look at the New Testament and the way Paul describes the churches in his letters, it's pretty obvious that he sees the church as present wherever Christians are gathering. And if you look at Acts 15, it's clear that the Jerusalem church did not think of itself as the central church or the other churches as just subsidiaries of the central church, but it thought of itself as a council giving advice to independent churches. It would really be much better for our denomination if we were to consider the courts of the church or the councils of the church as just that, councils. Councils that give advice, that give suggestions, but which do not have the power to control the behavior of local congregations. This would help depoliticize the church and help limit our arguments. Of course, there will always have to be some standards. There will have to be standards for ordaining pastors. There will have to be standards for the theologies that can be taught in churches. But by making these standards a matter of consent, we will make it much easier to preserve unity in the church.
And what was it about the writings of Calvin that also influenced this conclusion that you have?
If you read Calvin closely, you come to understand that Calvin thought of the church as what sometimes scholars call irreducibly local, meaning that the church is irreducibly the presence of a group of Christians who are worshiping Christ, hearing the word preached, having communion together, and holding one another accountable.
You mean just like within the local body and not from church to church in the connection, or?
Well, we've built our denomination on a theory of connectionalism that is really top-down, to the point where sometimes those in the central bureaucracy think of the Presbyterian Church USA as the church and the rest of us as just parts of the church, local congregational parts of the church.
Kind of like the government of the United States of America?
A little bit like that, or even more like a corporation like McDonald's, with the rest of us being merely subsidiaries. This is really a bad model.
Mm-hmm.
The better model is to see each individual church as an independent expression of the church, gathered together in the Reformed tradition to hold one another accountable, to ordain pastors who have common beliefs, but not in a bureaucratic way, in a way that flows from a relatedness of mutual theologies, mutual faith, and mutual morals.
Do you think that we're becoming too much like the Roman Catholic Church?
I do think that our current polity has more in common with both the state church models in Europe that grew out of the Reformation and the Roman Catholic model than it does really with a biblical or Reformed model of the church.
And just what, in terms of reaching a peace, the peace and preserving the peace of the church, is there a way, given the conflict and the disagreements today, is there a way to find peace within the PCUSA? I mean, I feel like that they'll know we are Christians by our love, and there's very little of that visible today.
I think that, especially for conservatives, it's hard for us to understand that we're not truly responsible for what goes on in other congregations. I think sometimes it's hard for the more progressive wing of the church to understand that they're not responsible for what goes on in other parts of the church. I do believe that a multi-fellowship model where the denomination is made up of independent gatherings, it's not what I call fellowships, would help make the denomination be more characterized by love, because we simply would have created a situation where we largely cannot fight about matters that today we try to make political.
And what about the money? What about the PCUSA owns our property issues?
Well, let's talk about money first of all. I do think that if we reform the denomination, we would have to have a period of time in which we voluntarily agreed that we were going to flow money in very similar ways to the way it flows today, because we don't want people to lose their jobs or their livelihoods. Over time, I think as the structures of the church get accustomed to working on a servant leadership model, we will find that there will be adequate money to meet all the realistic needs of the church organization. And there will be a church organization always. As to property, it's my view that property has become a burden to our unity. That it would be best if we transferred the rights to the property back to local congregations, allowed independent fellowships that they belong to manage those properties with them, but not to use the property clause to create a bureaucratically enforced unity, which won't work anyway.
Amen.